So before we go any further, let's just do a very quick round of intros. So just state your name, the project, one line on what your project does, and let's start off with one question. Why should people care about decentralized AI?
All right. Hi, I'm Himanshu Tyagi. I'm one of the core contributors in the Sentient protocol and the Sentient project. Sentient is building AI with community contributions so that we have models which can get you to build applications at par with perplexity. You can use our models and build applications on it. And when the applications use those models, the contributors get rewarded. 2 lines. What's the question? Why should we care?
Why should people care about decentralized AI?
Why should people care about decentralized AI? Well, first, we should define what is decentralized AI. But let's say broadly, people should care about decentralized AI to make sure that we have AI that is not governed by any single regulatory authority. It has the regulatory freedom to be used in different geographies, with different alignments, and with different options.
Hey everyone, I'm Shannon. I'm co-founder and CEO of Sahara AI, also an associate professor at USC. Sahara AI is creating a blockchain platform that really prioritizes AI sovereignty and provenance that basically create a sort of corporatized system to empower new revenue sharing mechanisms on top of this AI access we are creating. And speaking about why we care about decentralized AI, my take of that is trying to narrow this problem down to the problem of decentralizing the governance of the AI-related resources, right? We're talking about who created data, who own the data, who control the compute power, who is developing the model, who is consuming this AI capability. These are different parties, and we don't want the majority of these stakeholders to be really dominant or controlled by centralized providers. Speaking about companies like OpenAI, Google, Meta, right? We want these governance to be maximally, in a transparent way, to be distributed into different stakeholders, including you and me, so that we can create a healthier and more sustainable economics on top of that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Niraj, and I'm one of the co-founders of Ritual. The goal of Ritual is, or what Ritual is a decentralized blockchain that is AI-enabled and allows developers to easily integrate different AI workflows into their decentralized applications. Why I think decentralized AI is interesting is because it combines 2 of the great technologies of the last 20 years. It allows for AI to now be trustless in nature, private, decentralized, and to apply all these great tools that we've had with crypto. The crypto rails, like being able to tokenize things, attach ownership, and data portability to different types of assets, and a whole other range of things that I'm sure we'll discuss later today.
Hey everyone, I'm Trevor, the co-founder of Sapien. It's good to be on stage with some really good technical minds here. And at Sapien, we're building our one-liners, we're building the world's largest network of human data labelers. We believe kind of in the revenge of the humans, where the frontier data that's going to matter, that is going to be demanded to get to that next stage, step change in model performance, is going to come from humans. We think, if you look at the iceberg of data, right now the open web is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that, you'll see things like enterprise data that's not really accessible for these models yet. I heard a stat, JP Morgan has 120 petabytes of data privately, and ChatGPT-4 was trained on 1 petabyte. And so there's a lot more under the hood that we still have to train on top of. But below that, there's even a bigger iceberg, and we think that's kind of the end game, which is unlocking all the knowledge from humans and bringing it to the machines. And that's what we're trying to do at Sapien.
Cool. So what we've heard about is, we want censorship resistance, we want transparency, we want it to be more of an equitable economy. So let's dive in a little bit deeper, thinking about the different parts of the tech stack. What should be decentralized and what part should not?
What should be decentralized and what part should not? I'm sure all of us will have quite different answers for it. For me, the most important part that must be decentralized is the governance, the things about the alignment of AI, the things about decisions on who contributed what to AI. That is the part which I would like to decentralize. And over the last so many years, we have learned about the trade-off between decentralization and having trust-free compute. These are two different complementary things which should be combined judiciously. For example, if you are building highly performant AI, and you want to compete with the projects like Perplexity, like OpenAI, and have AI of that quality, then I don't think inference has to be decentralized in a way that it's geographically spread out. But the ownership of that inference can be decentralized. At the same time, if you are building very new AI applications where inference determines something about your protocol, something about more financially important decisions, then I think it may make sense to decentralize inference as well. But for sentient, our training, our inference is centralized. Anyone who builds the model, they centralize it. But the ownership and the governance of how those models is used and the access to the model is decentralized.
Yep, I think that's a great question because I've been debating a lot in the past few days on different side events about why some parts of the landscapes of AI shouldn't be decentralized. For example, one big thing I've been pointing out is the the compute shouldn't be decentralized too much. Because all the progress has made in the past 3 years is coming from building better GPU chips and then putting this GPU together, turn it into the data center, and then use this to power the scaling law of the AI training. And here's the progress we have today, right, with all these GPT models and other large models. And we shouldn't go back and then say, hey, let's decentralize this whole compute architect, right? But then I think the governance and ownership of the compute could possibly be decentralized, meaning that we don't want the huge centralized provider like NVIDIA, OpenAI, Google work closely with GPU data center players, and then they control all of the usage and even the pricing of this compute power. We want these data centers still physically be there in a centralized way, but we want every single GPU hours could be possibly owned by different stakeholders. We think maybe a potential way to change it is to tokenize this GPU compute power, push the logics of how the transactions be made onto blockchain so everyone can transparently audit what's going on with the compute, right? And this basically goes to inference, fine-tuning, retrieval augmentation, generation, all sort of the further AI capability everyone been talking about today.
Where I see, maybe kind of adding on to what you guys have said is, I'm a crypto maxi, so I, theoretically want everything to be decentralized, but, taking it from a more practical standpoint, I think everyone on the stage is probably making some trade-offs today, bringing in centralized pieces into certain parts of their products so that it's easier to go to market and faster to build up, a base of customers and base of users. And I think, when thinking through what are the most interesting ways to think about decentralized AI and its use cases are just what are the enabling things that you can't do in centralized AI. And I think, one thing that they had mentioned was the ability to create assets. The ability to create a decentralized asset that's global, accessible by anyone in the world, and now can plug into the world of DeFi and gaming and all the other great subsectors of crypto is just something you can't do with a meta model or ChatGPT or something like that. And so I think through what are those super interesting applications, and I think a lot of them are on this stage. Ability to do governance with models, ability to own models, ability to do turn data into an asset and distribute it to people, the ability to create these types of applications. And so that's really how I think about this decentralized AI question and what should be decentralized.
Yeah, I have a little more of a practical answer on, we're biased towards human RLHF data and fine-tuning data. And I think it's underrated. Humans, ChatGPT wasn't the first model at scale. It was the third. Facebook and Google had internal LLMs prior, but they didn't really work. And then when OpenAI kind of experimented with dumping large amounts of human data labelers in these data sets, it kind of like magically started working really well. I'm simplifying it a little bit. But to me, the reason we want to decentralize human data production is the same reason like Uber wanted to decentralize taxis. It's just better for everybody, and especially the supply side, which is the drivers or the human labelers. Right now, there's a giant economy of millions and millions of human data labelers that get paid about $1 to $2 per hour, mostly in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. And they're doing low-level data entry tasks for big tech labeling companies as proxies to the big models. But I'm not going to focus on like the negatives of it. It's, to me, the opportunity. We see specialized data labelers as huge opportunities for regular people. We see a world where AI workers are bigger than any other gig working marketplace combined, bigger than all the Uber drivers and the Door Dashers, because these models are craving more and more human expert knowledge. And whether you're a pancreatic cancer researcher drawing bounding boxes around tumor cells and cancer cells to train models how to detect cancer, or you're a Solidity developer labeling Etherscan data to help train a model how to like do price predictions or something, I think it's super interesting to say, hey, we can actually monetize our knowledge, our specialized knowledges, to these machines. And so we have kind of this new symbiotic relationship with them where they need us more than we need them, in some sense.
OK, great. So I guess so far on stage, we've heard about people talking about different parts of the stack, whether it's model, data. Trevor, you mentioned a lot of that. Compute, whether it's training or inference. Let's kind of move on into models a little bit and double-click there. So right now, that's a lot of open source debate that LLMs are getting a lot more commoditized. Open source LLMs are getting a lot more cost-effective. It's very transparent. People can customize them. And there's a lot of people in the community that think that this open source approach enables higher quality of models. Do you think LLMs are getting commoditized? And if so, what would be the mode of projects after that?
LLMs, as in open source LLMs, are getting monetized?
LLMs in general are getting commoditized.
LLMs in general, of course, are getting monetized. And there's no doubt about that. Everybody wants to interact with an LLM right now. I mean, the monetization is secondary. Once you see a value of that size, value is created of that size. Monetization is just an indicator of that value. I mean, this is a foundational thing which is so breakthrough. Every kid, starting from 12-year-old to every adult and to 40-year-old, all those guys are jumping into AI, shifting, want to learn about LLM. There's no doubt about LLM monetization. So would that LLM monetization only go to closed source model? Or is there a space left for open source model? I think that's a more interesting question for me.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well.
OK, so if I just talk about LLM monetization, for sure, there's no doubt LLM monetization is there. Maybe the nuance to that point is that the number of use cases which have started working and which have captured people's imagination are not as many as one would think so far. If one imagines an AI application, the best thing that comes to mind for everyone is ChatGPT. And there are surveys, and you can go to places like India. Most people won't know what Gen AI is, LLM is, but they will know what ChatGPT is. But that's because that's the application that has captured everyone's imagination, that LLM can become gateway to knowledge over the internet. The previous search is now LLM. The other use cases which are making sense are very hard use cases like coding, coding assistance. But whether there be more use cases that can be monetized, I believe there are many. I believe everyone is trying to discover. But there are not too many winners right now. For example, I'm pretty sure customer service will take a big hit. Salesforce may have a huge victory there. That part will happen. What happens because of this math problem solving and this, whether innovation will be outsourced to LLM, I don't believe that we are close to that right now. So the use cases part of the LLM monetization is just getting discovered. It's very early. But everyone is looking at that. They will enter every use case. It's just like websites enter every use case.
So Himanshu, you believe that LLMs will be getting commoditized. And if so, what would projects then turn to as their moat?
Sorry?
As their moat.
As a moat for the LLMs?
For projects in general.
OK, so this is a great question. So how does an AI application work? Is it all LLM? Is it all single LLM? Or there's more to it? So if you go to a foundational model and ask it a complex question, does it just spit out the answer in all the details? And the answer to that is no. There's a lot of reasoning steps involved before you get the answer. There's a huge difference between a perplexity and a GPT model. And if you just take perplexity off the shelf, GPT off the shelf, and try to create perplexity out of it, you may not succeed. Okay? And worse still, if you take Llama off the shelf, an open source model, and try to create a performant application like Perplexity, prompt engineering, RAG, and all those gymnastics you can try, the answer is no, it will not work. So there's a lot of difference between this foundational model, which is a very genius piece, just gives a quick answer, and an application which works. And the art is in how models are combined, how intelligence steps are broken down into different parts of the model, a planning model, a reasoning model, a function calling model. There are a variety of features of a model that are used to build a high-performant application. And that's the gap, at least for now, that's a very exciting space. And that's the gap in which now O1 has started entering. And that's the gap where everyone will enter for now. So there's a foundational model, which is like huge knowledge database captured in this 405B or whatever, 1 TB parameters. And there are other units of intelligence broken down to give you an application like Perplexity. And so there's a lot of space left to monetize beyond just the LLM.
Got it. Very cool. Niraj, what do you think?
About commoditization of LLMs?
Commoditization, and if it is, what should be the mode that projects should be working on?
Like LLM model creators should be thinking about?
Project developers who are working in the space, some of them rely on tech. What other things can they rely on if LLMs are getting commoditized?
Okay. And hopefully I don't repeat anything, because I could only hear half of what you were saying. There's like
completely.
An echo.
Yeah, this huge echo.
The echo is really bad. Okay.
So are LLMs becoming commoditized? I think yes, certainly. I think both in part due to the big open source movement over the last kind of 1 to 2 years, which is really not the case 4 or 5 years ago when all this stuff was being developed in corporate labs and less of like a public interest and fervor in open source technologies. I think there are questions around how capable are these models and how capable can we push these models with their existing architectures. All of the existing evals that we've had, every single one keeps getting broken. And these models are just becoming more capable than anyone, whether the public or AI researchers would have thought, in the last couple of years. So I think over time, I think each kind of architectural shift will become commoditized. I think we need to see what maybe many of these companies are thinking about, which is, are there new and interesting architectures, thinking about, is there something after the transformer, other types of Gen AI models that we can kind of leverage inside of these models to do certain types of tasks. So in building a mode, I think we're going through a period now. We've had this like very big new technical innovation, and people are thinking about what are the next directions that we need to take in the market. And really, I think a lot of these are going to be driven by these companies having these large profit motives and a large need to go and generate cash. That will be the big driver of, I think, a lot of the progress. Because the space has become so financialized, that's going to push the development of new models, and that will push the moats. But for me to say, will there be a strong moat with one model or another in 10 years? Hard to say. But I think crypto incentivized models could provide a formidable competitor to the decentralized, closed source, for-profit models out there.
So I want to add to this point real quick. I think in the whole process of LLM being monetized right now, there's two parties are pretty disencouraged these days. Actually, the model developers are pretty disencouraged because you think about you develop a proprietary model these days, very likely you have to bundle your model with some serving platforms. Like you exclusively deploy your model checkpoints on certain GPU serving providers, and then you start monetizing there. And your business model essentially is adding a margin on top of the GPU cost. And that margin basically represents how much your model, your proprietary model is priced. And we are seeing super competitive market right now between all these serving providers. So that margin getting really thin. That's really discouraging to model developer. And then another party in this process is the application builder who using these proprietary model endpoints to really serve customer and take revenue. And they have a huge say about how much they want to pay to the model serving endpoints, which are the model developers. And they also accumulate the final user feedbacks through the apps. They can decide whether I'm going to give this user feedback to the model developer to further iterate a better model. So they have the control of many things. And I think this kind of relationship really need to be changed in a healthier way to encourage a better ecosystem for model developers to shine. Right?
Yeah. One analogy, I know when Niraj was an investor, I think I heard him talk about this. You hear about the hourglass of crypto. There's like or even the internet. Like the thin middle is the protocol, where it wasn't really a value accrual mechanism, and it was kind of like the infrastructure below and the applications on top where the value accrued. And I think that's another way to ask the question you asked is kind of where is the value going to accrue in the AI stack? Or even to put it in a different way, where is a sustainable competitive advantage? So is it in compute? Probably not. You can just, the next guy is just going to buy more chips and make bigger data centers, and now you're not as competitive as him. And what about the algorithms? Well, there might be parity with kind of the RLHF algorithms and the transformer algorithms as well. So I go back to data. I think to me, that's probably the last chance these businesses have for a competitive advantage. If you're JP Morgan and your entire services business is going to live inside of a free LLM, data is the only thing you got. And you're even seeing this trickle down to startups now where the verticalization of these models, kind of like verticalized B2B SaaS was kind of the venture story of the last, I don't know, 15 years. It's kind of the same kind of thing in these big legal, what's it called, Harvey, legal data, and they have like some data mode of some kind. And I kind of go back to what I said earlier about there's the open data. That's easy now. Everyone can get that and crawl that. So it's going to be what's under that, not just creating new frontier data, but getting access to Reddit's data and paying big licensing fees or figuring out how JP Morgan can like monetize their own data somehow in a new way. I think that's kind of, from an investment standpoint, where you want to be thinking about placing bets.
Yeah, and maybe just piggybacking a little bit on that. Obviously, giving data contributors a way to participate in the AI economy is great. But we also know that data is not equal. There are obviously data that is a lot more high value. Can you talk about how decentralization will help us procure that high value data?
The echo again, how to value decentralized data.
So not all data is equal. There is data that is pretty low value. There's also data that is, frontier data that is really helpful in getting a lot of the AI models going. How do you think about decentralization helping us procure such high value data?
Yeah, I go back to kind of my opening statement around expert knowledge from humans. That is the next chapter. It's like getting inside of specialized human brains and then somehow compensating them for it appropriately. So like I said, right now, the equilibrium price for low-level data, this is a stop sign, this is a baby. A lot of that's being automated, and B, it's very low-cost data creation or data structuring. So the next level is like much more or less scalable. It's like getting inside. We actually did a project at Sapien for a large Asian education company who wanted us to bootstrap a network of Mandarin-speaking mathematicians because they had $5 million contracts out for math GPTs, an algebra GPT, a calculus GPT. There's an interesting reason why they needed that we could talk about too. But so now we have to go and find highly skilled, more highly demand-paying mathematicians who speak Mandarin. So what I'm saying is like this is, I think, the more valuable data that's going to help these models like get out of this little lull we're in terms of plateauing and get to the next level. It's just going to cost a lot more, and it's going to require a lot more kind of logistical planning from getting humans reasoning to the machines. One last comment on that I heard from one of the co-founders of Scale AI talk about was why we don't have AGI yet. And one of the main reasons is the data on the open web, where most of these models are trained, and I'd love for the smart guys to comment on it as well. It's kind of the result of human reasoning. So it's kind of the output. Like, you think about what to write on the internet and you write it. You don't write about how you came to those conclusions and how you reasoned about it. So when the machines train on that, it's not a surprise that they're kind of like one-dimensional and they don't get the reasoning part down. So I think that's another kind of meta question here, is how do we give these machines more reasoning data to be, in a learning standpoint, how humans think and learn and reason, and bring that to these large data sets as well.
All right, cool. Let's jump a little bit to compute. Right now, there's a ton of distributed GPU marketplaces out there, Akash, Render. Do you think that this will be a significant trend in 5 years' time? Will distributed GPU marketplaces be a significant part of the market in 5 years? And if not, why not?
For me, I'm looking right now for cheap compute, which works. Distributed or centralized, whatever it is. I want to save some money on the thousands of experiments that any AI company would do. That's very important. So if distributed or not, to become useful today at the volumes at which bigger cloud providers are useful, one very important thing is that it should work. You should have that software layer sitting on it. There are many applications where performance are not such a bottleneck. For example, if I'm fine-tuning a smaller model, that's quite possible to do on a smaller compute. But give me the software layer that gives you feature parity with a centralized provider, which is the easy part. I don't know why the distributed compute networks are not solving the easy part first. Build a good software layer over it. Fork from LangChain or whatever and build a good software layer. Then we can use it right away. Whether it can be sustained, I'm not sure, maybe not in this kind of applications. The hope for sustaining distributed compute is the new kind of applications will come, mostly driven by crypto. I think crypto AI will be the big consumer of distributed compute as well. I think just the enterprise AI use cases, this big model building use cases, it will be hard to compete with players like AWS and Google right now. In fact, someone mentioned if a transformer architecture would change. None of that will also change because of the kind of money that has been poured to optimize compute for those few architectures. The whole TPU architecture of Google is so narrowly optimized for transformers. So many of these things are difficult to move now. The architecture of the models are difficult to shift. I think if you compete on those kind of use cases, decentralized compute will have a tough climb. So they will be very useful for new use cases, which we don't see so far.
And I think this might be a question that might not be even valid in 5 years, because at that time we might have a model that is small enough and capable enough that we don't really need a compute network to power like what we're doing today. So we don't even need to worry about, hey, I need to connect all of our GPUs on different data centers, on different server racks to power a big enough model. And I think the main reasons to have a compute network to be established is the fact that you need to keep transferring the compute informations across all of the nodes in order to do some synchronizations. For example, facilitate a type of updating of individual preferences to a central foundational model that is also open and transparent to every single one to use. This is kind of a collective intelligence, basically, idea. Yep.
So if the question is, will we have GPU marketplaces in 5 years, I think the answer is yes. We'll have both centralized versions like we have today, and then we'll have the decentralized versions, as you mentioned. But yeah, I agree with both of these guys that are we going to see like 10,000 GPUs in like Asia and India working together at the same time to like work on a model? Like, probably not. I think we'll probably see the decoupling of the compute and the intelligence to some degree, and people can contribute their pieces to a network of intelligence, or we'll see more like kind of local clusters start up. And I think we're seeing this evolve in the decentralized GPU networks today already. The utilization rates are still pretty low, but I imagine as we start to see more people that are developing these crypto-native models come online, we'll start to see the patterns of how people actually use these together. And then also, will we start to see these like distributed inference plays where it's multiple computers working on these results, or is it the result inside of a TE and then get the result back, and it's the machines are larger that are providing the results. So a lot of open questions, but I think yeah, that's kind of how I would dice it out.
Nice. So recently, we've also been getting a lot of insights into the financials, unit economics of OpenAI. OpenAI seems to be the main company in the space that's been making money, but is still unprofitable. In a decentralized world, how do you guys think about profitability?
I can start first. I think this is the problem space that me and Sahara AI is most excited about because it's so tangible and so burning. If you look at today, like I said, the whole life cycle of AI model development, it starts with where you get the data, probably from individual users of AI or application, and then to the model developers start putting together compute resource, data resource, and the recipe of the model to create a sort of first version of the model, and then you deploy it, start integrating into application, and from there you start having user feedback, and you start these whole iterations many times until you get to a good product market fit for your application, right? And if you look at this whole process right now, the dominant party is the application builder because they have direct channel to the end user who pay for the apps, and then they control the revenue. They can say, hey, this is how much I'm willing to pay for the data providers. This is how much I want to pay for the salary of the model developers. And then for the compute provider, these days we're seeing the saturations of the compute powers, and the market of compute is actually very crowded these days. So if you look at this whole life cycle, I think it's not very sustainable because eventually you will see the super app, which are basically companies like Google, Meta, maybe OpenAI down the road, who control the superpower apps, will become the dominant of all of these upstream stakeholders. They can price the data, they can price the compute, they can hire all of the good model developers. And then as this time goes, you will see the super app start automating part of the human's jobs and cutting out our job opportunity and create a very different society down the road. And the question now is, would that concern everyone sitting here if this happens in 5 years? I think people will have very mixed answer. If you are feeling really burning about the fact that your life and jobs going to get impacted by this like dominant centralized provider, I think you should be part of our community of decentralized and trusted AI in the sense of start asking to protect your user data, protect your compute, protect your know-how about model development. And a way to achieve to that stage, I believe, is to use the blockchain's technology and privacy protection methods to create a copyright mechanisms to record who has done what, to what extent in this whole life cycle. And then you can use that provenance infrastructure to create some new economic mechanisms of both pooling resource to build AI model or to give out the shares of the model to different stakeholders to power some more exciting and more healthier economics. Yeah.
Just to build on that, I think it's not clear where the revenue is going to come from. On the one end, I think there's an argument to be made that the consumer's going to win, and we already are. Like, for example, when we did our logo, we got like a quote from a branding agency for some crazy amount in the UK, and then we're just like, let's just go to Dolly and check it out, and we just, for $20 a month, got this logo, and we don't need designers and agencies anymore. So who's winning, who's losing there? We're winning, and maybe the agency's losing. But you can also look at it a different way, where you're seeing like startups now where one or two people can build like venture-backable companies. We saw this in crypto with companies like Uniswap getting to venture scale with just a handful of employees and a relatively low amount of lines of code written. And so what I'm saying is you can potentially get a lot more leverage, and the bar for quality of startups and design is going to go up, and we're going to have more startups. But we could still have those hyperscale startups that do really well with less people, and that's generally good for venture investors as well. So to me, it's unclear.
Interesting. Himanshu, why don't you have the last word?
Yeah, I don't think in terms of unit economy and profitability. I'm an academic, unfortunately. But I must say that there are things bigger than these things. This is a completely crazy thing happening. We are this is not a value stealing thing. We are pushing the economy and unit economy, and money will catch up with where AI is taking us. It's not the other way around. It's not stealing value from the past. You are seeing completely crazy advances in robotics. Things which were done by Boston Dynamics over 20 years are now recreated by newer companies in 2 years, 1.5 years. Things which were unthinkable in terms of foundational model for robotics is making such a huge progress. And it's completely new value being created. Economy will follow. It's like the internet era where suddenly the capital was not related to real estate alone, and that was not the most interesting investment, and it turned out that there is this new crazy thing called software, and now this is a new crazy thing called AI, which is changing everything. There is no doubt about economic value creation. I don't even want to bother about it. Everything is changing. The demand is so high. Who captures that economic value? That's a difficult question to answer right now. But whether value would be created or not, no doubt about it. Money will catch up with it. It doesn't need to catch up with the money.
All right, I think that's a beautiful place for us to end on. Let's give a round of applause for the panelists. Thanks a lot, everyone.